Yes, speaking of disruption, our guest today was going to be David Ross today, 3D printing, and he works for a company called Stratus. And he either he is struggling with the link or perhaps with WebEx. So we may take our disruptive experience today and innovate. And Anna, you and I have talked about allocating some time and energy for this anyway. In conversation with Nacuya, Jim Oliver, who's also here, and Illusionai, and basically having a conversation about innovation. And so that we might just hunt a little bit and be disruptive ourselves. So we had allotted an hour for today. We really want to use the time well. So if you have general questions about innovation or what we're doing with the Fellows Program, or you're in the midst of innovating yourself, we'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, what I might do is start with some questions of our panelists about what they're doing and how they're working in their programs with innovation and introducing innovation. And Anna and Nacuya, Jim, you can also feel free to ask me about things about my own innovator journey. Happy to share that. And Anna, I wonder if we might start with you, your innovator journey. Can you share a little bit, because it's actually quite intriguing?
Okay, I would put myself on the spotlight, but also invite all 54 participants to pose me a question. So my provocation would be, do we need innovation? Like, why do we need innovation? And because I'm from the field of design, I always thought that we need creativity, and creativity is something that all human beings have. So because innovation sounded like business, money, someone getting, like super rich. And I never thought of myself as a person who was going to move mountains or be in the CEO realm. I feel like very different from that world. So my question to all of you, and I hope that you put some responses on the chat so that Nacuya can engage all of you in the discussion, is why do we need innovation? Why are we talking about this? And throughout all our flagship series, we presented you with several CEOs, COOs, CTOs that actually say that innovation is a mindset, and I'm not sure about that. I'm going to be contentious with all of you. And I believe in disruption, and I believe in changing the status quo, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to say that innovation is the way to go. But because of my background in creativity, already have it in arms, so why are we creating this in the world? So my path in innovation was very twisted, and I never thought that I was doing innovation in any of the things that I was doing, ever. It was not identified. I didn't have that as a concept. For those of you who don't know me, I'm in the College of Design, in the Department of Industrial Design. And since the beginning of my life, everyone thought that industrial design was make products neat. So Apple and mobile phones and things like that. But it was not. It was more about how people relate with each other, how we use objects around our world. The world is full of stuff. So it was quite daunting to be in this field of design. And then design thinking popped up. And I thought, ooh, I think like that. So could I actually help the world in putting this forward? So my innovation, and it's helping education and educational practices or people in companies. That's what I used to do in the Netherlands, helping big corporates or big organizations to get design thinking into their everyday life. And I'm not talking about training sessions. I'm talking about everyday life, spending time on the computer, and how that can transform the way they think. So I went from creativity to innovating your everyday journey. And that was quite rewarding. It still is.
I wonder if you might talk specifically, because when you were in the Netherlands, you did, speaking of innovating, you really worked almost on a social innovation campaign. You really worked to change a mindset. And it's not unlike what we're trying to do here at Iowa State, is really look at how do we shift people to be more engaging and inviting of change in both the way we operate and what we offer. Could you share a little bit about what the project that you did in the Netherlands?
Yes, so for those of you who don't know the movie, but now you know the remake, I was a Ghostbuster. Literally that. So our job, my company and my fellow colleagues and educators, academics, researchers, whoever, psychologists, sociologists, we would go literally inside the companies. We were ghost busting frustrations. So like what all of you feel now, like I don't have time to study, or I don't have motivation to be on Zoom, all the everyday life, like what we call the beans. So the barriers for you to have creative moments or enjoy your life. And our job was to be Ghostbusters. So we were innovating the way that companies could actually shift what's so in a big company or an institution, you have people, but it's not the people who do the task. It's the way that people relate with each other. And all these frustrations, we needed to somehow capture them. And like Ghostbusters, yes.
I want to capture, define social capital, because that
Okay.
is a term that might be new. And I think it's really important to what you had to do and how you had to move that and engage social capital in that institution.
So one of the things about social capital, I'm sure that most of you have heard innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, but there's one thing called intrapreneurship. And intrapreneurship are people like Karen or Nacuya or Jim or myself who are within an institution or within a company or within, I don't know, whatever, wherever you're working, at Menards for that matter. You produce your tasks, so you have a function also part of a team. You interact with your customers, you interact with your peers, you interact with your teachers, but in the way that you operate and motivate others or actually give feedback or do projects together, that constitutes the social, let's say, tissue of the institution. And sometimes you don't need to just be focused on performing at high level in your task. It might be that you're just doing a boring job, but you are one of the biggest people with social capital in the institution because you are the one who gets everyone to play a game or the one who gets everyone together. You're the glue, the social glue of your group or your peers. And most of the times, some projects in companies, innovation projects, fail deeply, not because of the functional task of inventing something, but because the people who are involved do not work well together or have personality issues. They don't know about group dynamics, and the project that could be an amazing thing for the future of mankind, humankind, all of a sudden becomes poor and a drag. And our job as Ghostbusters was to identify what were the ghosts of that dynamic and help them to put the ghost out. And we had what we called POUT, that's our innovation, platform of unspoken things, and talk about the difficult things that people have. And then past that point, they understand that they can work together and the project has a different breeze. You are enjoying, and then the innovation can happen at these two levels of the level of the function that you are proposing to the world, the application that you're giving to the world, but also this intrinsic motivation to be part of something. So that's what we were doing. That's one of the last things that we were doing. And at Boeing, like at Boeing. So it's a big thing. It's a big thing. It's not just about airplanes. It's about the people who design them as well. So
And
yeah,
that's
sorry.
Go ahead,
speaking
Anna.
of entrepreneurship, for me, I learned about entrepreneurship maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And for me, being a millennial, I think oftentimes we think like, okay, in order to create something new and groundbreaking, you have to have a startup. You have to follow like the same paths that you see in Silicon Valley, let's say that. And I think entrepreneurship helps tie in this human element to these larger corporations that can seem like cold machines that have been around for a while everything is tried and true. This is how we do things. But I think entrepreneurship and introducing these models into these corporations that have been around for years can help them also recruit and bring in new talent and fresh minds who are entrepreneurs at heart, but maybe want to work within a system that's been around for a while.
Yeah. I don't know, like the pressure that all of you have, those of you who are listening to us, but you have this pressure in your college, in your major, to be the best engineer or the best this or the best that, so that you go out into the world and your identity as a person is the profession. You are the engineer who's going to do these things and change the world. But actually you can be a person engineer. You can join whatever company at whatever level, big companies or small companies, and you can actually engineer so many other things. So, and I wish that you were things that we would learn entrepreneurship at school, that we would learn soft skills at school, know how to talk with each other, how to connect. That's my
way. I actually call them, we have hard skills, right, that they call technical skills. But the things we've been calling soft skills should be really called harder skills, because they are
soft skills are harder. Yes.
So really, they're not soft skills, they're harder skills. And it's the difference, if our listeners can think of the difference between technical competency and behavioral capacity, because ideas, technology, those types of things are static unless they have dynamic people and humans that can move them. So what you talk about, social capital, political capital, the capacity to influence the environment is really critical. And I think one thing we might share from an innovation standpoint is to talk about the difference between cooperating, partnering, complying, as opposed to collaboration, which is the capacity. So great innovators have the capacity to be influenced and influencing others. So I think that as we think about this, and so often we are quick to identify innovation as technology or some sort of industry advancement. In fact, the greatest impact, and where our young people can be engaged pretty dramatically and where they have to grow the most, is their capacity to move systems, mindset, people.
So I have a question. So what would you all say to young innovators that are fresh out of college, going into their first role, and they're like, well, I don't have the capacity to influence. I don't have all of these harder skills that they're talking about. What resources would you give them? What models, what advice would you give to students that are experiencing that or thinking that right now?
Okay, that's such a great question too, because we had the experience even yesterday. I brought one of our software engineers into a conversation. I call the new BA of education bold asks and big action. That's what BA stands for, right? So I think as faculty and staff at our university and as students, we have to have a completely different expectation if our students are going to participate as innovators. So that means when we have meetings with industry stakeholders and when we have research development, that students are invited into those conversations. So yesterday, for example, I brought one of our software engineers, Brenner Stickney, into a conversation with Paul Willard and Dennis Molenberg to talk about how they could influence potentially the intersection between agriculture and aviation. And we had a fabulous conversation. At one point, Brenner asked, is it okay that I ask you to be on my project? And I think that for too long, young people have been waiting to be invited in to get permission. And I think that there is a respectful way to assume that if you are in the conversation, it is okay to ask. There's a way to ask a question and engage in a conversation. But we first have to get students to believe that we are inviting them in. Hannah, your thoughts?
I would say yes, and so bold asks, and not be afraid to go and ask the CEO directly, can you help me here? But the other way that Ghostbusters operate, it's not to go directly to the top of the chain and actually understand what are like all of us agents who can be the trigger for changing something. So start small, and sometimes it's just like one person that you can talk to or explain your project. That person keeps that in their mind. They're going to share with someone else, and then word of mouth just like takes it all. And when we were in the Netherlands, or here, you call it gossip, but in the Netherlands, this is the root of grassroots projects. So you don't try to tackle the whole system or the top of the chain, that it's the executive power, the CEO, the CTO, the COO, but actually you find people that are inspired by your, take it to another person because they have friends in other departments in the institution. And then all of a sudden it starts spreading. And this is called one of the strategic, tactics of implementing change and innovating things, is that you don't need to do, sometimes there's a difference between taking steps, doing small jumps, and taking the leap. So what Karen was talking about is like, take the leap, have the confidence and go there. But sometimes due to your personality, lots of circumstances in your life, you don't have that creative confidence to go there. You can do a small step. So it's yes, and you can join these things together, I would say, from my perspective.
Can I add?
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes.
Do I get to talk? I'll jump in. If we're talking about entrepreneurship and young people in a big organization, it's daunting when you start. And there's a whole field you can read about if you Google emotional intelligence.
Yes.
In learning how to listen, and then using that information to ask questions, and to there's no such thing as a dumb question, especially when you're new. And you will learn from who's going to be helpful, who's kind of disruptive or obstructing. And navigating those human relationships, as Anna said, is critical in a big organization, to understand, first of all, what your role is, but why are we doing it this way? Can you explain how this works? And also, you'll be in a million meetings in a big company. You'll spend most of your day in meetings. And what you don't want to do is sit and look at the table or your feet. You want to pay attention. You want to ask questions and volunteer for menial tasks and under promise and over deliver. So if somebody says you take an action item, I'll take that on, and then you do it, and you do it ahead of when maybe you said you do it in a week, and then on Monday you show up to your boss and say, is this what you were thinking, right? And be proactive is the main thing. And from that, you'll develop relationships, you'll develop a reputation, and that's the beginning of being an entrepreneur inside a company, a change maker.
I have a follow-up question for all three of you, and it's kind of twofold. Anna, you mentioned getting people excited about your ideas, and I could see that theme throughout, Karen, what you were saying, and Jim, what you were saying as well. Could you speak to some strategies, tactics, some soft skills, or what we're referring to as harder skills, that can help get people excited about your ideas as from the perspective of a student, and also from the perspective of maybe some of our faculty and staff who were on this call?
Okay, Karen is the lady of the art of persuasion, so I'll let her do the persuasion part. I'll do the other part, which is the vision. I don't know how, I know that everyone is always talking about, oh, I have this vision, but if you're not able to put people over there in that future when you're talking and talking about it, how you see it in your mind as possible, so you need to talk about it as it is a thing, it's like already here. Look at this thing that it's happening. And yes, I agree with all of you. It's proactivity. It's like every time, and Jim said something that it's quite important, you develop a reputation. I had the reputation of being the loudest Ghostbuster because there's no filter in my brain. So I would always in the room. And sometimes it was hard because I got a reputation, the gossip girl. But at the same time, I like this fact that you are able to talk about it and put people in the same space that you are, of the vision of your idea, your thought. You just say it and you just show it, and all this enthusiasm because you see it already is one of the triggers I find for anyone aspiring to be a great innovator, is that you have this capacity of showing that it is possible. In your mind, it was already there. So if it exists here, and that's, I think, one of the characteristics of everyone that we interviewed in the flagship series, when they were talking about their things, they saw it in their mind. So they were like the lettuce designer, Dennis Molenberg, everyone that we interviewed, you could see it in their eyes and in the way that they were talking, that they could see it as a reality. Triggered by it, you just say, oh, I want to be part of that dream. I want to go and be part of that team. So talking about it, I think it's one of the biggest things. I'll pass it to
Yes, I think there are also some really great things that young people can do, and it's really how I advanced. I mean, it was just as difficult for me to entrepreneur an innovation program here at Iowa State as it is for a young person that's engaging into a business. I mean, it is true that I had some skills and experiences, but truthfully, how you move things forward is a couple things. First of all, you practice as if. You practice as though your vision is already manifested. So instead of waiting, for example, you take my example, Brenner Stickney. I brought him into those meetings and he said, I don't have technical readiness level. And I said, well, let's practice as if. What words do you need to learn? What processes and systems do you need to do? And so we can map actually some of those things out. And the more he uses those words and the more he uses his study plan implement process and systems, there's some formulas and tools, the faster he goes because he is living in the moment and acting as if. Anna.
Our students at this point, so I'm talking on your behalf because I have that, but I feel like an imposter. I feel like I don't know I have the know-how to be in these meetings. They're talking about things that I don't know of. So how do I'm a fake. So how do you go around that?
I'm glad you asked that. The first thing I tell students is that you are completely insignificant. All of us are insignificant. And therefore, we can't screw it up. I mean, literally, that anything by showing up, doing the hard thing, delivering what you promise, it is inevitable. It's actually physics. Every time you show up and do something, something happens. So showing up is actually quite a bit of it. Being willing to learn, being willing to explore, being willing to ask questions, being willing to say, I wonder what it would look like if, or how would I approach this? Those questions really, the expectation of all of us is not to be an expert. In fact, we want to be surprised by what we have to learn. And so when we engage in innovation, we are not being expected to teach people. We're operating in the territory of the unpredictable and the unknown. We are all expected to be idiots. We are all idiots in that territory. Thank goodness, because that's how innovation progresses and happens. For example, this group of undergraduates I'm working with who didn't know quite where to start, but the questions they posed were profound because they didn't have experience. Because the experts, the faculty that we brought in would have never thought to ask those experiences about those opportunities. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think what Jim was offering as well is the art of asking questions. Most of the times, if you ask a silly question, we call it the silly question, like, oh, I have a stupid question. I was like, no, there's no such thing. It helps the ones who know about what we're talking about to reframe it. And at the moment, innovation happens in the space of reframing things. And by trying to explain or reframing the way that a piece of knowledge that you're not, like you're not privy to that piece of knowledge because you're not on the top chain, it gives, I don't know, it's like a blank paper for you to have new ideas. Think it Tucker or one of the Davids that we interviewed, that they actually say they would prefer to hire immediately students out of college than big experts with 10 or 15 years in the field. And because you don't have vices, you don't have expertise, levels of expertise that allow you to have mastery, great, but at the same time, they work as what we call in design and creativity fixation. You're fixated, you have your blinkers on, and you're not able to expand your horizons. So, and I like the fact that Jim brought up asking questions. There's no such thing as a silly question. Never.
I agree.
And a follow
Go
up
ahead.
to that is don't be afraid to reframe it yourself. So say,
Yes.
Anna, I think what you were saying, what I heard was this, and then Anna,
Exactly.
clearly I missed the bat on that one. So communication is just the key to everything, but some of the best leaders I found do a great job of rephrasing. Here's what I'm understanding your point is, and you try and put it in your own words. And then they say, great, yeah, you got it, or no, not quite. Here's the subtlety that you're missing. And you just draw it out of people. It's just a skill you'll develop.
Curiosity really is the best form of flattery.
Mhm.
And so I think that's really important. The other thing for our young people to remember, and this is true for us as innovators in an institution or any business owner. I was a business owner for many, many years, 2 different businesses. And what we have to remember is it's not the same market anymore. Young people, we cannot afford for young people to earn their way up to the promotion chain. The time that we are collapsing time. We have to accelerate the progress of young people. Young people know something that people in my generation, I'm saying, 50s, 60s, 70s, don't know. You have to understand what is your differentiating advantage. You should be able to understand what could I bring as a young person that does not exist within that company. And some of it is recent technology. Some of it is capacity to be flexible. Some of it is, it could be, I can bring other young people to this. I can help with recruitment. I know how to socialize an idea. Some of it is sheer work and ambition. I'm willing to work 12 to 14 hours a day. So one of the things when I work with our fellow student is I am helping them define their differentiation statement. You have to understand your own capacity to contribute. And sometimes that is not technical knowledge.
And Karen, to your point, I think that that's spot on because the younger generations, I feel like it's easy to kind of get your foot in the door and start out from the very bottom. Like, okay, I'll work my way up. And a lot of people, we feel like we're just going to work our way up the chain. But I think as young innovators, knowing exactly what you contribute, how you contribute, it's easier for you to say yes and no to things because everyone's looking for interns, everyone's looking for extra hands, bright minds, especially coming from Iowa State. You're going to get a lot of opportunities to contribute in different capacities, but instead of going down a path that's easy, like, okay, I'm studying these areas, but I'm looking to develop these 3 skills. So when someone offers you a position or an internship or something, you can say, oh, well, I really appreciate your interest in my level of expertise in this area. However, I'm also looking to grow in these 3 or 4 areas. Will I have the opportunity to expand those skill sets as well? I think that's so key, knowing what you contribute and also where you want to go. Finding your areas where, like, I'm not strong in this, but I'm incredibly interested in diving more. For me, I'm a communicator, right? My degrees are in public relations and in political science, and I work at the library as the external relations director. But within the past year, I've noticed like I'm really great at systems thinking and strategic planning and driving processes. So as things come up in the community, people always try to put me in a communications focused role. And I always say, oh, well, what about these areas? Can I serve in this capacity? And that has opened up tremendous doors in other areas.
Yep. Child, you're talking about invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a really difficult area because often when somebody invites themselves, especially a young person, into an area, it can be assumed that there's a question of permission.
Mm-hmm.
So recognizing where you're permitted to explore that. One area that I think I am advising students about is they say, I'm doing this, as you say, I'm doing communication, and I really want to do X. And so they get impatient, right? And so what I'm trying to tell them is to learn to innovate where they are.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in, for example, a pollinator project and you want to work in space mining, how do you differentiate your contribution? How are you learning and really mining that experience in your pollinator project
Mm-hmm.
that could be then applied and translated to space mining? Because it's how you show up, how you prove yourself, how you build your skills. And then when the opportunity presents itself, it's a, I really love doing this, and where else can I help you? I have a specific interest in space mining. Is there a place where that you know of where you might direct me? I think one thing we forget is it's better to ask, if you ask for advice, you're going to get investment. If you ask for investment, you're going to get advice. And so I think that there are a lot of people who are willing to help young people, but you have to figure out how to be invited. How do I position myself to get invited in?
So translating exactly what Karen is saying, don't go and ask for money, ask for advice. And then there's a point in the conversation that someone is, oh, I like this that you're thinking. I'm going to give you a couple of dollars for this. And this lesson I only learned after college, like when I had my business, and I was like, oh, and the bank puts all this pressure on us, like business plan, and you of that, and it was just like no. And all of a sudden when we started talking about ghost busting, there were people like, what's that? I was like, oh, can you give me some advice? And it's exactly that. So I really appreciate that thought. I think we have a question from the audience, don't we?
I don't see it in mine. If someone...
It's me commenting probably because I want to make sure also for our audience to capture some of the learnings. But one of the things that Anna brings up is you have to remember as an innovator that it might not be A, B, C, D, E. That when that invitation occurs, you have to be ready to dump your expectations and look at the opportunity in front of you. If you want to be invited and you want to participate, you have to give up your agenda and you have to be willing to say, there might be bigger stakes here and I am interested, and you have to know what your bottom line is. So as an innovator, I give up my content agenda and I look instead to a process agenda. In other words, I don't care what field it's in, but I know I want to be connected to things that are accelerating, differentiating, and big. And so that's what I look for.
It's true.
Jim Oliver, comments from you?
All right, can I ask a question to Jim Oliver?
Sure.
Well, we do have a question from a student. Can you see that, Nacuya?
No, it's not showing up. Maybe it went directly to one of you all, but I'm not seeing it. So if
Maybe I'll submit it. It's Aluala. I'll try and say the name, but anyway, yes, thank you. They're asking, how do you deal with others that have introverted personalities in your workplace? And how can someone with an introverted personality make more contributions in meetings? So that sounds like it's coming from the person drawing people out, or if you're personally introverted. I guess there's two different sides to that question. I put that to the panel.
First thing is allow it. One of the things I think we try to do is we try to do too much work for other people. So if someone is introverted, we create a situation, I think, where it's okay and in fact brilliant to be introverted. And so part of successful innovators get people one-on-one and ask them what their process is. Ask them how they like to contribute. So if you're having trouble and you're in a situation where people aren't innovating, I always try to expose what situations, what does a situation look like? I wonder what it looks like if you were innovating. How do you experience yourself as an innovator? Because change-making opportunities are very risky. And for introverts who look at security and who look at introspection, they're going to look specifically for a safe place. So as an innovator, it's your job to create security, which means allowing people to be introverted and also understanding how they best like to contribute. Does this make sense, Anna?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I'm going to mute my phone because my extrovert people are trying to communicate as well. So there's several ways to look at this. We can be doing this and divide the world in introverts and extroverts. I'm going to say that there's no such thing. So even personality tests that work with introspects and introverts and extroverts, they are two sides of the same coin. So the common term now used in psychology is ambiverts. And what happens in certain settings, your introvert function comes bigger because of what I was talking before. You feel an imposter, or you feel a fake, or you don't have this creative confidence to say, I'm going to say something here. But there's other spaces that you have in your life that you are completely extrovert and you feel completely at ease. You're the rudest person possible to your friend because you call it as it is. So it's just a question. I was going to answer, Jim. It's a question of context and not so much that you are this or that. It's just, the trick is, when do you know how to say something, and when do you know how to put your hand in your mouth? I don't know the answer yet. As soon as I know, I'll let you know, because I have trouble with that. But I find that as soon as I learned the concept of ambivert, it helped me a lot. I am a person who delivers training, so I need to be working with people. So at the end of the day, I have to have introvert moments, and I like to be by myself, and I freak out if people are around me. And so I had to understand that there were two me's, there were two Annas. And in meetings, when I felt like I cannot say anything, I said, no, this is the moment that I actually need to say something. So oh my goodness, I want to say your name properly.
Yeah, me too.
Olaolua.
Yes, very good.
When you are introvert and you need to say something, maybe you don't need to say something, because if you're feeling that you don't have that, you're sweating or you're getting nervous, the butterflies in your belly are getting too big, hold the butterflies and don't say anything. Maybe it's context. Maybe out of the meeting, you grab one or two people and you say, look, that idea that you have, or the thing that you were talking about, I also have some thoughts that I would like create the context for you to be in the space of the introvert, still sharing and doing something. For those that Jim was talking about, maybe the ones who don't shut up in a meeting, like the thing that Jim alluded, you need to listen. You really need, if you're only talking, you don't get any people behind you. You know that expression, I have your back? It comes from a reason. You need to have people who are also ambassadors of your idea. And if you're just talking, and you don't hear what they are saying, then you're going to do alone. And most probably your innovation will not have an application into the world, because no one is going to adopt it in terms of whatever you're designing. So I would answer this question to you, measure the context, not yourself and your belly butterflies, but the context of the situation. And then focus from personal identity, you actually will be able to work the situation better. That's the way it happened to everyone that I've seen. Yeah.
And I will add, if Ola, I wonder if you were on last week's flagship, we had Jim Waters, who emphasized it's kind of futile to try your personality. right?
Yeah.
But find ways to leverage that and use it. So what Anna said was spot on, I think. There are plenty of opportunities, and none of us are all introverts or all extroverts. I've also witnessed leaders that do a tremendous job, and this is actually in my faculty life, is you have faculty members that never say anything in a faculty meeting, and you're discussing an important topic, and the leader will listen to everybody and maybe shut down those who talk too much, but then go around the room and say, Karen, I didn't hear your opinion on this. What do you think? And then you draw them out. Don't put them on the spot, but offer them the opportunity to speak. And maybe they'll say, well, I don't really have an opinion yet. And then maybe in the hallway, then you pull them aside and say one-on-one, what do you really think, right? That kind of thing, like Anna was saying, the right context.
Jim, I want to point out too, remember, here's an important mindset. If you're working within if you want to contribute meaningfully, if you can remember, it's not about you. It's not about you as a person or you as a human being. You want a human process. But what you are doing is elevating the business cause. It takes some of the pressure off of you personally, and you are attaching to the passion of the purpose. And as you attach to the passion of the purpose, you think every communication should be, am I advancing the purpose? Am I advancing the passion? And if you are advancing the purpose and the passion, then that's when you're going to be inspired to contribute. But if it's about you and you think it's about you, then the innovation is going to end with you. But for innovation to work, you have to elevate the purpose and the passion. And that usually takes us out of yourself enough that you remember that you're being invited to contribute. And I just think that's really important. We think too much about ourselves, and we forget that we are better when we attach to something that's advancing.
Yeah. So I have a question for the three. I feel like I'm interviewing you all. It's great. So my question is about, actually, I will pause my question because we have another one in the chat. So this question is from Isaac. Sometimes in the fear of being rejected, but how to get rid of that fear? So dealing with fear, being afraid of being rejected, how do you handle that when you do get rejected, and how do you stop the imposter syndrome?
Okay, first and foremost, you will be rejected so many times throughout your life until you are 100 years old, whatever it is. So it's better to accept it, that it's going to happen. But dealing with the fear of rejection, I understand you completely, because you're putting a pressure so big. Okay, in the world of creativity and innovation, I'm going to say it, rejection is the oil. It's the motor, because you really go forward. It has synonymous with failure. It has synonymous with errors, mistakes, rejection, all the negative things that we've been taught that are like we shouldn't go there, are exactly the motors. Like, we need to fail, we need to be rejected, we need to receive bad feedback, bad critiques, like things that hurt in your skin, to actually use it as a learning leverage to think like, oh, that's how the world sees it as well. And I'm not putting aside the fact that it tastes and it's horrible. So Isaac, we're with you. Sometimes it will hurt a lot, and because it hurts a lot, you don't even go for it. But the mission now is to actually have either the failure or the rejection as something that kicks you forward. It's just like, okay, this is going to happen. I'm going to accept that this is going to happen in some ways, and it's going to give me a perspective on how to move forward. And yes, we have not done a good job in our education, in our society, in accepting failure, but that we will, and our future generations will be okay with it. Yeah, it's here to stay.
I'm going to piggyback on that, because if you can think of it this way, again, remember what I said, elevate the business cause, right? So if you can breathe in, if you can take rejection as an inhale, and you breathe it in, and then you let it sit. And then the exhale is curiosity. So inhale the rejection, exhale curiosity. So it's always a response with a question. So you have to think of it like an act of grace, really, because how you respond to rejection will determine how safe somebody thinks of you in terms of collaborating with them or in terms of being invited. So when I experience rejection, I take an inhale and I say, tell me more about that. What would that look like? I am wondering about that. I think that's a good pause. I need to understand more about the pause. And so if you respond in that way, then you begin to build a reputation as someone who is willing to pause, reflect, and be thorough, because it's more important to advance your stakeholders than it is to advance your agenda. And that's hard for people to accept. We are execution focused. Advance your stakeholders and you will advance your agenda, but you have to be willing to wait as long as it takes, because without stakeholders, there is no innovation. There is no innovation.
Yeah, one of a key example that we can give you is like applying for jobs and you're going to be rejected and it's going to hurt because you're sending 100 CVs and no one is calling you back, or you go for the second round of interviews and then at the last minute you are rejected. One of the best advices that biotech was like, and it's not a rejection on you, is the things that you bring to the company are not aligned with the mission. So they need to find another person who do it. And on the other hand, what you can do is like, okay, what are the things that are not aligned with that company? So do I need to get it? Or do I need to find another company?
Right.
Maybe I was targeting the wrong people to work with, or the wrong business, as Karen was saying. And it really is, shifting this as like a personal, personal thing in your heart to something that it's like, what is it in my portfolio that I don't have, that I need to develop, or that I need to direct elsewhere? It was a very good question, Isaac. Very, very good question. Yeah.
I think we also think of rejection as an invitation, because, and that is a really hard thing to accept. But what we have to realize in situations where it's unpredictable, and in situations where we're inviting change, that creates insecurity. It is the most risky situation. And while we might be comfortable with doing that, others are not, which is why rejection is just about waiting. Rejection is about re-inviting your stakeholder. Rejection is just affirmation that the stakeholder isn't feeling secure and comfortable yet. So your job, instead of feeling badly, because if you feel badly, then nobody advances. Instead of feeling badly, you have to think, oh, they're rejecting this. How can I make them feel safer? How can I find out more so that they are more comfortable? And when you make it about someone else and moving the agenda, I think you forget, you feel less like, I'm not good enough. I'm not enough.
Absolutely. And you go ahead on, and we have another question in the chat.
Nacuya,
no, I was just going to say that one thing also, and Nacuya, you spoke about this, so maybe you are the right person to answer this question, is that don't also think that rejection, failure, mistakes in the process of innovation come separate and they are just units. They also have other things in the making. So whenever a rejection happens, it doesn't mean that it's a rejection just on that. There were like pre-agreements. There were things in the institution that we are not like aware of that made the rejection happen, and it's very targeted at you. But if you understand the bigger system, the whole impact of everything that you were proposing and you were rejected, then it's easier also to bite it, because then you understand, oh, okay, there's this and this behind. Big system. Instead of thinking of a part, it's a big system of things. But Nacuya, you talk about systems.
I could go on and on about systems. I want to get to another question that we have from Alina, what is the best advice you could give about not to feel nervous during an interview? So Jim, we'll start with you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. It's natural, first of all, to feel nervous. We did have another flagship speaker talk about how to basically present yourself, and it's not about you, first of all. You want to make sure that what you bring to the table is what the company's looking for. So first of all, you have to do your homework. You have to understand the company. You have to understand what the job is that they're looking to fill. And then you speak to how you would fit in there. And I guess the fear might come from questions that come out of left field. So I know in the tech industry, there was a legendary email or interview questions from companies like Microsoft that were, they want to see how you think on your feet, and that can be very disconcerting. So, estimate how many gas stations there are in the United States, and then, you just throw a number out there, they might not be interested. But if you go through a thought process and talk through your thought process, that's what they want to hear. So it's really just remember to breathe. Remember, you're not just listing off your credentials, despite how wonderful they are. You want to talk about how you can make their company stronger and how you will fit and how you interact with people. You want to talk about the value you bring to the company, not so much how great you are. So I guess that's all I can really bring to the table on that question. Others?
I would say express curiosity. If you're applying somewhere, I would hope that you're applying for a reason. This company aligns with your core values, the pillars that you stand on in your personal and professional life. So express curiosity on where they're at with certain industry trends. Ask them some questions. They might ask you some heavy hitting questions, but you have the opportunity to do the same thing. And I think when you come to the table expressing that curiosity, like everyone on this call talked about, they'll see it and they'll be like, oh, this person is going to push us. This person is not going to sit in the back of the meeting and not speak up. This person is going to drive us toward change. So don't be afraid to ask the questions that you've always wanted to know and figure out where they're at with certain things that are not listed on their website, that's not open for public consumption.
I would add to the one, someone says, oh, the nastiest question I get in an interview is that when they ask me, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it's horrible, but the retort would be, okay, where do you see your company in 5 years? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be? From my perspective, I wish that this company would be here. And then you have a conversation of something that you're building together with your interviewer, then actually being grilled and feeling like, I don't know where I want to be in 5 years. I just want my job. So I find the questioning that Nacuya is offering, or Jim saying that indeed, like, nerves will always be there. Accepting that, but asking the questions. One thing that I would say from my side, and I know that it's not well to think about your executive presence. And sometimes when you are in the middle of the interview, you don't have that capacity to see yourself. So you're just like nervous and like, did I say that? Did I actually say that? I cannot believe. But it's going to the interview, what we call in training, like executive presence. I'm here, I'm going to talk about what I know. I have some thoughts about the company because I did my research, and it is what it is. Like you're present. You're not thinking about the things that you should say or the things that you didn't say. You're like present. And I know that this goes a little bit with the wishy-washy of meditation and mindfulness that some of you might not be so engaging with, but being present, it's really something that I think it's the hardest part of an interview. It's being present in the interview and not the job. It's not the job that you want. You want people to remember you as a, like the interviewee. And There's not a lot about writing on this, but it is something that all our innovators, if you saw in the flagship, they were in the session with you. They were relaxed, they were laughing about themselves. Sometimes Karen or Jim ask a tough question and they feel like, oh, I don't know how to answer that. And saying this out loud, it feels like, what? You don't say that in an interview. But they did. They show vulnerability, or like, I need a couple of seconds to think about this. And showing the process that you are thinking about it, being present. For me, I think it's one of the biggest things in an interview process of some sorts.
I want to piggyback on that a little bit too. When you spoke about the 5 years, one of the things that we are really compellingly trying to get our innovation fellows to do is to define our own processes and our own values. So in an interview and in a situation where somebody says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? There are some really great answers, like, are you a lifelong learner? Are you inspired by change? Do you like to engage stakeholders? And so those are answers that are legitimate that you can give in 5 years. I see myself in a position where I have advanced my technical readiness level as it relates to these core skills. That's one potential answer. I see myself engaging with groups of stakeholders where I might be able to lead a project. So think of the things that are important to you generically in terms of how do I contribute value? Because you can never have a wrong answer if somebody says, where do you see yourself 5 years from now? Because you know you've taken time to think about how do I contribute value. So I want to, we are at 1 o'clock. And we said we were going to go for an hour today, and I wanted to do that. I really appreciate you kind of being flexible with us. Part of innovation is learning how to create value in a situation where there might be some surprises. But this series has been very profound for us. We've learned an incredible amount of innovation lessons from the people that participate. And we have more. Next week, Raed Hafez with El Grocer, the largest growing grocery in the Middle East. He actually worked with companies like Google and other types of companies that were big in significant positions and chose to leave because of his passion to create opportunities for business and to serve customers in a much more intimate way and a much more personal way. He took a big risk, and I can't wait for you to hear his story at next week's flagship. So that's next week's flagship, and we have a unique opportunity today. If you haven't enrolled today for Bill Gross at 2 o'clock for moving from ideation to business idea, you really don't want to miss it. Bill speaks all over the world. He is one of the world's most creative people, named by Fast Innovation. And Fast Innovation is a company that looks at investing in global companies that are moving quickly and likely to be very successful. And so Bill is one of those people. It will be moderated by the CEO of Energy Vault. Energy Vault is the world prize winner for economic innovation in the and that, again, to be exposed to those types of thinkers and watch how they deal with these problems, you don't want to miss that. So thank you for listening today. Thank you, Nacuya, Jim, Analuj, for really going with it. Thank you, Spencer, for helping us on the technical side. And remember, it's innovation for anyone, anywhere. Here we are.
All right. Good luck.
See you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.